Dustin had only one goal: to uncover the cause of his mother's death. The only way to do it was to dig up her grave. 2 days ago, she was buried. What he discovered when he lifted the coffin lid would plunge him into horror. Dustin was not in a good mood that fateful night and could barely think clearly. He knocked 3 times quickly on the door of the funeral home and, without waiting for an answer, pushed it open with a shovel in his hand. Inside, he saw an old man sitting calmly at a desk. Old Thomas was the cemetery guard. Dustin demanded that he take him to his mother's grave. His mother, Monica, had been buried 2 days earlier, and Dustin needed him to show the way. Thomas asked for her full name and then agreed to lead him. He remembered easily he had personally witnessed the burial. When they reached the grave, Dustin wiped the tears from his eyes and raised the shovel to begin digging. But Thomas immediately stopped him. Exhuming a body without proper permission was illegal. He demanded to know why Dustin needed to desecrate his mother's grave. But Dustin kept digging, and after a while Thomas realized he couldn't stop him. After all, the boy was younger and stronger. The only way to stop him was to call the police, and so he rushed back to his office to grab the phone. Dustin continued to dig. Memories blurred in his mind. He had been studying at a university far from home, and when he discovered his mother had died and was already buried, he had to drop everything, even his exams. Just a few hours earlier, his father had called with the tragic news, but his father only told him 2 days after the funeral. Dustin was furious. He couldn't understand why his father had hidden the news from him until it was too late. As a result, he never got to say goodbye to his mother. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't stop, not until his shovel struck the hard coffin. Immediately, he dropped the shovel and was about to pry it open, when suddenly, the air filled with the wail of sirens. The police rushed toward him, and before he could do anything, he was forced to the ground, his hands cuffed. Thomas appeared behind them, holding the phone with an apologetic look on his face. He felt he had no choice but to report the current situation. Exhuming a body without proper authorization was a serious offense, and as a guard, he was obliged to report it. Still, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for the young man, who was clearly deeply distressed over his mother's death. The police began interrogating Dustin, demanding to know why he needed to desecrate his mother's grave. Dustin collapsed before them. He fell to his knees and broke down, tears streaming from his eyes. He admitted that it was hard for him to believe that his mother had died of a sudden heart attack. There were no signs that this was the case. His mother had been a healthy, cheerful woman who never let hardships defeat her. Dustin considered her death suspicious. She had died suddenly and was buried just 1 day later. All of this convinced him that something strange had happened, and he wasn't going to stop until he uncovered the truth. However, although the police understood that he was grieving, they couldn't simply allow him to desecrate the grave. If he suspected something suspicious about his mother's death, he had to report it so the proper measures could be taken. Dustin begged them to let him at least open the coffin just to see his mother's face one last time. The police were moved by his words, but still hesitated. They didn't want to break the law, yet the grave was already open, and only the coffin lid remained. Dustin decided that if he kept pleading, they might let him see his mother. Luck was on his side. At last, the police agreed to let him take one final look at her. Unsteadily, he walked to the grave and carefully climbed into the pit. The police stayed close by, while Thomas stood near the edge of the grave with a grim expression. Dustin gently grabbed the lid and lifted it. With a heavy heart, he looked at his mother's face. She appeared so peaceful even in death, and it broke him inside. Overwhelmed with emotion, he took her hand and squeezed it. Then he froze when, in response, he felt her hand squeeze back. Suddenly, his mother jolted awake, and her eyes opened. Her dry lips parted slightly as she gasped for air. The officers gasped in shock while Dustin could not believe his eyes. The police immediately called for an ambulance and rushed Monica to the emergency hospital. Dustin was taken to the station to give a statement. He could not understand how his mother ended up buried alive, and how the doctor had confirmed she was dead. Everything that happened was simply bizarre, and he could barely comprehend it. But the most important thing was that his mother was alive. The next morning, the doctor's report arrived and they realized she had never suffered a heart attack. Instead, they found large. Further investigation revealed that just 2 months earlier, Brian had taken out a life insurance policy on Monica. If anything happened to her, he would receive a substantial amount of money. This served as a motive for the police, and they immediately obtained a warrant. Brian was arrested the same night while shopping at the mall. He didn't even have a chance to escape, as he was instantly surrounded and taken into custody. He was brought to the station and interrogated for several hours. At first, he denied the accusations, but as soon as he learned Monica was alive and the CCTV recordings showed him buying the drugs, he broke down and begged for mercy. He said it was never his intention to kill Monica, but that this was his last resort. His mistress had become pregnant and began demanding money. He loved her deeply, far more than his wife, and he could barely withstand her pressure. Together, they devised a carefully thought-out plan: take out insurance on Monica and then kill her by poisoning her favorite drink. Brian burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Listening to his father's confessions, Dustin felt his world collapsing. He could not believe his father was willing to do anything for money for his mistress. Dustin felt nothing but disgust as he watched his father finally taken away in handcuffs and thrown behind bars. A few days later, the mistress was arrested as she tried to flee the country. She too was sentenced to imprisonment. Later, Monica was discharged from the hospital. She was proud of her son for uncovering the truth. Together, they returned home and tried to put their lives back in order. What an incredible story. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future stories. See you in the next video.